All right, good evening and welcome everyone. Well, it's another Monday Night Live, but we are launching a brand new series tonight with a very special guest, which I'll introduce in a second. But our new series are called Life Building Live. See, Ringway Church, our full name is Ringway Life Building, and what an honor to welcome tonight our guest of honor, our special guest, Karen Holford. Karen, good evening.
Good evening, Julian. It's lovely to be with you here.
Great to see you. As you know, Kaya, our competent moderator and panelist, is here with us. Hi, Kaya.
Hi.
Hi.
Karen, you serve in different capacities, but you are the director for the Trans-European Division Family Ministries, and it's of course, I thank God also that you have been. We have been in the same class for the past few couple of years.
Yeah, that's been fun.
University,
Journey of learning.
but you're also a highly trained and family therapist, and you have a lot of different specialties, of course. And if you feel free to probably make an introduction about yourself for our viewers, our friends, they're watching us live on Facebook Live on our webpage, but also in our webpage, ringwaychurch.org.uk. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a family therapist, as Julian says, and actually my husband is too, but that still doesn't mean, we still have arguments, right? So this is not telling you how to have no arguments at all, but how to have them better, because most of us have arguments, and that's not a problem. It's just how we do the argument that's a problem, and what the outcomes are that can be sometimes not what we would like. So I'm going to be talking about conflict. And when I lived in Scotland, I volunteered at the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution. So I learned a lot about conflict and how to manage it from them. And that's really changed how I live my life and how I relate to people. And since then, I've learned even more things that I found are really useful. So what I'm going to be mostly sharing tonight is how we can reduce the conflicts, be proactive to make sure they're less, and the ones that we have are probably less stingy. So that's what I'll be talking about.
We're looking forward to that. That is amazing. And I think we even have an ice-breaking question for our viewers. I know that there is increased interest tonight because of the topic. And of course, when people heard that you are presenting, Kaya, what are we breaking the ice with?
I think the first question was, what do you argue over most at home?
Yes, what do you argue about most at home? It's quite an interesting question. And I've asked this on several presentations, and it's surprising what I get back. So if you want to can be completely honest, I think Bernie and I have argued about every possible thing anyway, so there'll be nothing new. But it's interesting to see what people argue about. So,
it's about the dishwashing. It's a dish, it's about the dishes. Let's face it. But that is my answer to that. But we're gonna, we look forward again. Karen, we are so thankful that you have also prepared a lovely webinar. I guess we can call it a presentation. So you feel free to go ahead with the screen sharing and. So, we are excited, but of course, everybody online is watching. Feel free, make comments, ask questions, and Kaya and I and the team will get back to Karen and we'll get back at you at the right time, depending on the topics, on the subtopics of this very, very important and relevant topic. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I was just smiling, Julian, because you said you argue about the dishwashing, and some research recently has shown that that's what everybody argues about. That's often the most common thing we argue about is the dishwasher or the washing up. Whether we have a dishwasher or whether we use the sink, there's always something to argue about. Who didn't do it? Who did do it? Was it done well enough? And should you rinse and dry? And so it makes all kinds of arguments. And we need to perhaps think, what's going on there? So maybe as I present this seminar, you'll understand a bit about what might be happening around the kitchen sink. And I'd like you to start by thinking about a conflict you had recently, Maybe it was about the dishwashing. Maybe it was about something else. But think about a conflict that is quite fresh in your mind, because as I go through this, what I want you to do is to think about, okay, so if I think about that conflict and what Karen just said, what did I do well in that conflict, or what could I have done better next time I have a similar conflict? Because we tend to kind of repeat the same ones quite a lot. So think about what you could do differently and what you did well, and what you're going to learn from it. And at the end, at the very end, be good to know what you learned that you're going to try out in your relationships. So this is going to be a fresh look at conflict, because usually we look at, after the conflict, how do we patch it all up? And I will talk about that, but I'll also talk about how can we live in ways that will reduce our conflict. So in the Bible, it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And I think in the overall big context, God is the hugest peacemaker in the universe. He's trying to make peace with us and with everything. And when we work to create peace between people, then we are his children. We're doing the same kind of thing that he does. And that's so important. And why should we even try to be peacemakers and lower our conflict? Well, when conflict doesn't get resolved, it leads to breakdown in relationships. And we've all seen that happen. And when the relationships break down, it has an effect on people's mental health, even on their physical health as well. And when I was in Scotland, where there's 5 million people, they said that several thousand teens and young people a year become homeless because of family conflict, which is so really sad. And that's what we were working against. And actually, many people will leave church because of conflict in their homes or between them and other people at church. And so even in a church context, conflict can cause a lot of challenges. I'll just skip this one over here. So peacemaking characters. So how can we be people who are more likely to make peace? So think about on these scales, like the more proud we are, the more likely we are to have conflicts. If we're on the other extreme though, we may not even challenge a conflict, and then we can get trodden on like doormats. Then there's selfishness versus generosity. So some people just want their own way all the time. Other people are quite happy to be generous. If we're critical and judgmental, then we're more likely to have arguments. If we're accepting and forgiving, then we'll be less likely. So being suspicious and cynical can cause more arguments. Believing the best in other people tends to reduce them, and so on. Hurting others increases arguments. Being kind reduces them. And the need to control and have my own way is often something that stimulates very strong arguments versus being able to compromise and collaborate. So I wonder what character strengths that you have. If you were to stop and think now, what are the character strengths I have that help me to have better conflicts than I might otherwise have? Or are there characteristics here that I have to look at and go, oh, yikes, I'm a bit like that. Maybe I need to move more in the other direction. So think about that honestly for yourselves. What we need to remember is that conflict is normal. Every relationship experiences some degree of conflict because we're all different. We have different beliefs, different family backgrounds, different experiences, different needs. And so because we're all different, when we bring our differences together, they're going to bump into each other, and we're going to have to work out. So if you want to do this and I want to do this, how are we going to manage that? So well-managed conflicts, they're there really to help us explore our differences. How am I different to you? And how do we put that together? How do we use those as strengths and skills and find a way to collaborate? How can I be more empathic towards what your experience is? How can I listen and understand your perspectives better so that together we can find better solutions and learn how to take care of the relationship better and not hurt it? Conflict is really complex, and most conflicts are quite messy. There's really simple solutions, even with the dishwasher, because we keep doing that argument. All kinds of things affect the way that we do our conflicts. And so today we're going to look at just how we might reduce some of our conflicts, understanding that some are very complex and will take a little bit of a while to untangle, maybe even with some professional help. So there's some basic conflict styles, and at the bottom, the arrow goes shows the importance of the relationship. So the nearer you are to the point of the arrow, the more the relationship is important to you. On the left side, there is the importance of self and winning. So how important is it for you to win? And so then we have some different conflict styles. So one of the most challenging is actually people who are directing and controlling. They say, I'm going to win, and that means you're going to have to lose. And when people do that, the relationship isn't so important. Their most important thing is winning. And maybe they will win, yes, but what they have is they build up resentment, distrust, and fear in the relationship. The people around them eventually don't want to engage, they get resentful, they don't trust them, they pull back, and the relationship may break down completely. And then there is avoiding, which says, I'm not that worried about winning, but I'm equally not that invested in this relationship. So maybe, we both lose out. We don't have to talk about this. We don't have to sort it out. We'll just not talk about it. And there's silence and coldness and unresolved conflict because no one wants to talk and no one has the energy or the investment in the relationship to try and build a closeness. Then we have harmonizing over on the right, where I'm not that worried about winning, but I really care about this relationship. So I'm actually happy just to lose and let you win because it's not a big deal to me. And we may do that sometimes, but if it's always, then it becomes unbalanced. One person becomes overly submissive and the other person is always winning. And there's different reasons why we might do that. And some people live their lives like that. And I have some relatives who've lived their life like that completely. Then there's compromising, which is in the middle there. And that says, well, I can win some and you can win some. That's okay. But it can be competitive because you could say, well, you've won the last two, so now it's my turn to win. And that's not actually building understanding between you and collaboration. And really the best way is collaborating. I win, you win. So the relationship is important to me and the fact that we both win is important to me. Now this takes more time because you have to understand each other better. You have to think about what you want and what I want and how we can have both. And that's a bit more tricky to do. And it's not always possible, but when you can do the collaboration, that tends to be the healthiest way to manage the arguments and conflicts in your life. So that's what we'd mostly aim for. But I've been a mum with small kids and sometimes you just have to say, because I'm the mum, that's why. And you go for the directing, controlling thing because you just don't have time to explain to a 3-year-old why this has to be in this way. So we tend to move around between these different styles, but we need to move more to the right side and the upside where the relationship is important and both winning is important. So what I'm going to focus on today is more conflict reduction. So conflict resolution is often focused on mediation and solutions, but actually we need to step back before the conflict even happens and create the kind of relationships where conflicts are less likely to erupt and escalate and where differences are more likely to be quickly and easily resolved. Because this is where we can focus our attention and our actions in our homes, churches, wherever we are. And we also need to teach these proactive conflict resolution reduction skills to our children and young people. Because if they know how to create healthy relationships where we're less likely to have conflict, then they'll be much happier. They'll know how to manage their conflicts. They will lower the amount that they have and understand more how to take care of others to reduce them. Now, here are some really important questions. Because one lady called Sue Johnson, who wrote out some of these questions, she studied couples arguing for 25 years. Can you imagine? I mean, that would have just driven me totally crazy. And she was trying to figure out what's going on here. Why are these couples who are supposed to love each other or did love each other at some time, how come they can have such terrible arguments? And so she analyzed them over time and she realized that most of the time, they were not arguing really about the dishwasher or the money or the kids or whatever else in their life. Underneath their argument, there were these big questions. Do you love me? Do you care about me and appreciate me? Can you understand what I'm feeling right now? Can you empathize with me? Are you willing and able to help me when I'm struggling? And will you always be there for me? Can I trust you and depend on you? And actually, when we answer these questions in our relationships every day, we will naturally lower the conflict. We tend to have conflicts when I feel resentful towards you, or I think you don't care about me, or you're not willing to support me, and I'm tired and stressed, and I want you to be there for me, and you're not, and you've let me down. And that's often what fuels the conflict. Because in a loving, caring relationship where I'm appreciated, my husband understands my feelings, he's able to help me when I'm struggling, and he shows his love for me, then maybe one day he does something a bit out of character that annoys me intensely. And I'll go, you know what, he's just having a bad day. But if the relationship is not loving and caring and positive, and there's lots of other things going on, and I don't feel cared for and supported, if he does something like that in that kind of context, whoa, it's really going to fire me up, and I'm really going to want to fight. So how we answer these big questions well in our life, whenever we do this well, whenever we show care and attention and we support each other and all the rest of it, we strengthen the attachment between us. And each thing we do that shows love to the other person, commitment, support, care, appreciation, when all that is happening, then it reduces my sense of aloneness and the likelihood of having a conflict. I'm not questioning the relationship. I feel safe and secure in it, and then I'm much less likely to argue. So happy couples still have conflicts. Bernie and I have conflicts, but they're less likely to be destructive and have long-lasting implications. And if you ask us, when did you have your last fight and what was it about and who said what, we really can't remember. But if there's a couple that I see in therapy that have been having lots of conflicts and I ask them to tell me about the last argument they had, they will tell me every detail over 2 hours if they have the time, if I let them, about every single detail in the argument, because there was so much adrenaline coursing through their body and cortisol and all the other things, that everything that was said is ingrained in their mind, in their memory, and in their pain. Happy couples also know how to soothe each other and repair the relationship quickly after a conflict. And that's really important. How do we lower the energy, calm each other down, connect lovingly? And it's quite important to repair before bedtime. I know we often talk about don't let the sun go down on your anger. But some research recently showed that if you have a conflict with your teenager, if you're the parent and you can repair that relationship with your teen before bedtime, it will not have lasting damage. If it goes to the night, the teen will start to feel very insecure, very unsafe, very troubled. They may even get depressed, and that may escalate into something worse. But if the parent repairs before bedtime, it seems that there is very little lasting damage from that conflict. So the first thing that we can do is to be kind and loving. Good relationships need regular expression of mutual kindness, and that more kindly we treat each other, write messages to each other, speak to each other, the more loving we are and kind we are, then the less likely we are that people will have conflicts with us or will have conflicts with them. So the kindness is something that's really core in relationships to lower the conflict. Also showing appreciation. Resentment often leads to bitter conflicts, and the more appreciated we are, the less likely we are to argue and fight with people, and the more likely we are to collaborate. So if someone shows you appreciation, we're less likely to argue with them, and that's important. So if you want to lower the conflict in a relationship, start saying thank you, start appreciating the person, doing little things to show you care and see what difference it makes. So you might want to think, what are some ways that you can do this? And can you think of relationships where you feel appreciated, and think about how often do we have an argument? Is it less? Think about the relationships where people show kindness to you and you show kindness to them. How often does that get into an argument and a conflict. Be understanding and empathic. Focus on the other person's emotions, listen to their feelings, and express your compassion. Because when we show that we understand their feelings and we care about them, then they're less likely to want to argue with us. The Bible says, be sad with people who are sad, happy with people who are happy. So it says, listen to the feelings, understand them, and join them where they are, so they don't feel alone in those feelings. And then you feel actually more connected and secure together. And be helpful. Share your tasks together. Regularly ask how you can help other people. Do things you know your partner hates, like cleaning the windows or some other job, taking the bins out. If you know they don't like it, do it without being asked, and they will feel specially loved. Don't let people struggle on their own with a big task, because that tends to lead to resentment, to stress, and they're much more likely to feel conflictual. And look for ways to collaborate on projects as a team, because when you do things together, it builds your strength together, your relationship, your attachment, your sense of togetherness, and you're less likely to have an argument. So as a couple therapist, this is something that I try. And you might want to think about these questions for yourself. So I tell them, tell me the last time you did something kind for your spouse, the last time they did something kind for you. And sometimes they have to think really hard about this one. That's a bit of a tricky question sometimes. And they're like, yes. They might come up with something 3 years ago. So what are some of the kind things that you used to do for each other when you were first married that you really appreciated? So sharing some kind things that they did. Oh yeah, I remember way back when we were first married, he used to, or she used to. Okay, so you could do it then. I wonder when that stopped and why, and whether you could try doing it again. So I asked them if they're willing to try an experiment and secretly do something kind for each other at least once a day and write it down. And then when you notice the other person has done something kind for you, show your appreciation to them, but also write it down, make a note of it. And if you don't feel like being kind, well, we really need to try and do it anyway, because feelings can follow actions, especially kindness. So when we start to think of doing kind things for the other person, even if we really don't want to, eventually it does tend to build up some of the kind feelings and affection again. So we have a model that God loves us first, and that's how we love. We love because he loved us first, and that's how we can do love with others. They will love when we love them first, and we need to be willing to be the first person. So maybe you could think of some kind things you could do for the people in your home, and it doesn't have to be that big, but know that whenever you're doing something kind, you're helping to strengthen the relationship and lower the chances of having an argument. So kindness is really at the core of helping us to feel safe and supported in the relationship, so we don't fight. So I'm just wondering whether anyone's got any questions so far about this idea about being proactive and trying to protect your relationship by putting the positive things in first, even if you don't feel like it, and just seeing what happens. I would encourage you to spend a week experimenting, even if the other person doesn't know, being kind to them, appreciating them, doing things to help them without being asked, as many positive things as you can, and just see if it lowers the amount of arguments that you're having. Any questions so far? Any thoughts? Anything in the chat?
You know, Karen, I think Kaya will tell us in a second, but I can already tell you that I'm pledging to take out the bins.
Oh, wow.
Or,
And that's live now, Julian, so we'll hold it to you.
It's live, it's recorded, and I love doing it, and it's something that I know that Beatrice. The second thing is that I was happy that, there was at one point she probably was going to join us, but the little one is with her, and I'm happy in a strange way that she's not here because I know that she will be saying many things that I need to improve on. But
right.
But I so many great tips. Anyway, I'll let Kaya carry on with the questions.
Yeah, we do have a few comments on the answer to the first question about the arguments at home. And Ian says, which way round the loo roll goes on the holder, most common argument in our house. And Ben says, turning off the light after I leave the room. And Eileen says, coming late to the meal table when the perfect timing is important for the food.
Right. Yes.
There's so many things you can argue at home about.
And we all can relate to them, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all things we've experienced, you know, whoever we are, whatever home we're in, there are things. There's always one who's like taking care of the electricity. There's always one taking care of the loo roll. There's always one, you know, in charge of the washing up and knows exactly the best way to do it. And yes, there's always kind of rules around lunch, meal times and who comes and all those things and they're all important things, you know, to keep the house running smoothly. But what effect are we letting these things have on our relationship? We need to think about that. Yeah. And what's more important, which way around the toilet roll goes, or that we feel loved, or how the lights get turned on and off, or that we help to create love. So think, what can I do that's most loving? Are there some things that I can just let go of because they're causing a constant irritation, you know, a little bit of a niggle all the time? Because sometimes that's about power, actually. Who's in control here? Or I think I know better than you, and we should really turn off all the lights, or we should always do this. And so then that tends to put one person down and the other person feels like they're not good enough, and one person's always winning or telling them off or something. So just be aware of those little niggles, because they can become big niggles if we don't find ways to support them. But every couple has them. Bernie and I have those things as well. And so they're just there, and it's how do I respond? I can choose as well. If something's really important to him, I can choose that I'm just gonna let it be and try and fit in with his way, because it matters to him. Maybe not be a big deal to me, but if it helps him to feel better, then why not do it? So we can do it as a gift for the other person. So
Karen, we do have just one question from Martin. Maybe Kaya has it, but I have it on my phone. It's notwithstanding the instruction in Ephesians 6:4, it seems that episodes of conflict are inevitable as teenagers push back against parental boundaries. How do parents know when they are getting things right or wrong? It's from Martin. Now, you know, if you want to answer that at the very end after the presentation, that's also okay. You know, I'm just but just wanted to.
So I do a whole other seminar on that called Understanding Your
Is that another seminar? We will invite you again. So.
Yeah, that's the whole ball game. I mean, teenagers have to push against because they're creating their own identity. They have to create their own way in the world and be different, and that's part of their development. But understanding that question, it's a whole lot of stuff behind that. There's probably too much to talk about, but I can come back, you know. So we can do that another time.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll focus on teens. And I'm so thankful personally that you are focusing and that you are mentioning including teens. So that is great. All right, go ahead, please.
But a lot of these principles are useful for any relationship. So teens, your work colleagues, whoever you're working with, make sure the relationship is the most important thing with your teen as well. Because when the relationship is strong, you have much more leverage to, you know, to show care and to collaborate together. So relational insecurity is actually what's behind the conflict. So when we make the relationship secure, then we can we tend to reduce those conflicts. So we can express our commitment often, give people our full attention, listen to them, respond to their spoken and unspoken needs, and avoid doing and saying things that make other people feel afraid of you, because if they're frightened, then that doesn't help with conflicts either, or they may give in to you and you may have more power over them and things. So it's important to make sure that you don't create fear in the relationship, you don't create concern, you don't threaten to leave and things like that, because that's very unsettling, and then it tends to promote more conflict and distress. So how conflict escalates: when we experience criticism, a lack of support and connection, and little appreciation and little kindness, it's much harder for our brains to handle conflict well. because stress, anxiety, and fear stimulate the hypothalamus and the adrenal glands, and we tend to release stress hormone cortisol, which means we're more likely to become verbally aggressive, to shout, to abuse each other's feelings, and even become violent. So by making the relationship warm and accepting and kind, we lower the incidence of this hormone being released, which is more likely to make us have more aggressive and fiery arguments. But yes, when the cortisol levels are raised, then we stop really thinking carefully about how we're going to respond in the situation. It's harder for us to engage our frontal lobes and have some logical, rational thinking about the situation, and we just tend to get the fight or flight reaction that dominates our behavior. I'm either going to fight you, or I'm going to run away and withdraw, and it becomes more difficult to access our thoughtful, unselfish, and caring responses, which then escalates. It then causes that reaction in the other person, and then it just kind of can get really out of control. But we can help our brains to manage conflict better, because all of those things I said that reduce conflict tend to promote the release of the hormone oxytocin, which leads us to feel safe, happy, loved, and loving. And when our brains are experiencing those kind of things and we start to feel safe and loved and happy, then we are much less likely to have very difficult conflicts, because we can think more clearly, we want to be more caring, and how we respond is different. So we need to be aware of that. When we feel safely connected to others, we're better able to connect with the cognitive and reflective parts of our brain. So we can respond wisely, creatively, humbly, and unselfishly to the challenges. Now, there's some things we can do also. So if we do need to talk about a conflictual thing in the relationship, something we need to work out, then obviously try and make the relationship as warm and kind and lovely as possible. And then choose a time when you're both relaxed. Think about the warmest and kindest way to approach the topic. And give the other person time to think about the issue before you discuss it, because sometimes we have thought everything through in our head. We know exactly what we want. We think we've got everything, all our argument in the right order. And we go and talk to someone, and the other person has not a clue this was an issue. And they feel completely ambushed by the topic. And they're like, there's a stress mode. So we might be in the nice, relaxed mode, but because they didn't know this was coming, and they're like, oh, now what am I supposed to do? And they feel stressed, and their cortisol goes up, and they get into fight or flight, because they're like, I haven't had time to think about that. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. So if we feel ambushed by a potential conflict, it's quite helpful to say, I can see this is an important issue for you, and I want to give it some serious thought too. So is it okay if we discuss this tomorrow? So that's a positive way, a warm way of saying, I can see this is really important. Let me think about it so I can come to you with a more reasonable answer, and I have some time to think too. Then start warmly. So Gottman and Gottman in the Science of Togetherness says, when you warmly acknowledge the other person's hope and desire and challenges in the situation, that helps them to feel that you care. So, oh, I can see you really want to do this. I can see that's something that's amazing to you. And I really would love you to experience that. And my concerns about that are, if you're concerned about it in some way. But by warmly acknowledging the other person's hopes and desires first and connecting with them warmly, we show care, and then it's much more easy for us to express our concerns, but kindly and non-judgmentally. It's important to lower our voice too, to whisper, lower our voice instead of raising it, speak calmly and kindly, and use respectful language, because when we do that, again, it lowers the other person's stress level. And the more we can lower their stress level and our stress level, then the better we can talk about things in a reasonable, caring way, rather than a conflict that gets stingy and nasty. Listening well is really important, because when we know that our side of the story has really been heard, that really helps us to feel understood and cared for. So it's important that when one person is speaking, the other person listens and sums up their ideas. So you're telling me that this, you're saying that this is what you would like. You don't have to agree with them. Don't argue with them at this point. Just let them talk, or write their points down on a sheet of paper so they can see that you've understood what they were trying to say. When we fully heard their viewpoint, then we can respond more wisely with ours. Quite often we leap into a conflict, assuming a whole lot of stuff about the other person and what they're thinking and what they're going to say next. And we defend ourselves without actually really listening to what they're trying to say. But when we listen to them well, then you can say, now, let me tell you some of my thoughts about this. And then they may be more likely to listen because you're staying calmer. And when you sum up what they say and say it back to them and they agree with that, you're already creating a sense of agreement and togetherness. So this is one of my couple counseling things, because a lot of couples come and they want to tell me everything that's wrong with the other person. And so I had this rule that there's no complaints in my room. And I have a complaint form. And so if you want to say something, you have to write it out in this way. But it's not a complaint form, really. It's a respectful request form. So if they want to complain or say something, I say, put it this way. In this specific situation, when this specific thing happens, I feel because. And it would really help me if you would do this specific thing instead. And then I could help you by doing this. This is just one idea. What ideas do you have that would help us to work this out? So when we put our concerns in this way, and we're specific about them, we're not blaming the other person. We're just saying, when this happens, I feel because, and it would really help me if you would do this instead, and then I could help you. And we invite their ideas. It tends to keep things calm, polite, respectful, and clear. Sometimes when people can't argue at home in a respectful way, I say, how do you argue with your boss? Do you talk this way with your boss? And they're like, no, because I lose my job, right? Yes, if you can talk this way with your boss, you've got the skills you can transfer to the people you love at home, and you need to think about that. So imagine that your partner or whoever else you're arguing with is your boss, and think about how you would say it in a polite way to them. But if you want to take a picture of this screen, this is the one thing that has helped to reduce some arguments in our home, because once I figured this out, when I want to talk to Bernie about something a bit sticky, I can say it like this, and he often barely even knows that I've brought up an issue, because I'm just making a polite request for something that would really help me. And quite often he goes, yeah, I'll do that. I want to help you. And so it's a really helpful way to talk about things when you're not quite sure how to talk. So by having this pattern, you can talk about things much more easily, because you've made a safe pattern, and then you can feel more confident saying what you need to say. And you can write it out and even practice it, so that when you want to say it, you can say it more clearly. Because sometimes we haven't learned these skills, and we need to just try them out, practice them, and see what happens differently. Then something else we need to do is have an attitude of collaboration. We can solve this together. And it's really important that we admit our part of the problem, because there's pretty much always something that we're sharing. The problem is between us, and it's in our relationship. It's not in you or in me. It's a problem here that we're facing together, and we can solve it together. So we share responsibility for solving this. It's both of our responsibility. It's not all your problem. You go and fix it. This is our problem, and we can fix it together. And when we use words like we and our and us, it tends to help us to collaborate more. And another word that's really useful is the word and. Quite often we'll say, well, you want that, but I want this. And as soon as you put the but in there, you polarize people, push them apart. You want this, but I want this. And it's like, well, we can't have both. So one of us has got to win. But if we put the word and in there, you want this and I want this, let's see how we can have both. Then we can collaborate on mutually acceptable solutions. It's not always possible, and I'll talk about how that works on another slide. But if we start to use words like and, we, our, us, then we create this language of collaboration together. It's really important to aim for win-win, because sometimes we think, yes, I've got to win this argument. But when we win an argument, we nearly always lose vital trust and closeness in the relationship. Because I might have won, but the loser is now hurt and sad. They feel less than, they feel crumpled, they may pull away from me, I will have damaged the relationship. And so I'm not really winning. I may have won something for my ego, but I've broken the relationship. And that should be precious to me. I need to think about the relationship. How do I take care of the relationship? Now, we also have brain versus heart arguments. So I'm going to tell you a funny story here. So many years ago now, because our middle son was 15, so that's about 15 years ago, actually. Bernie and I were studying family therapy, and we had this idea that we really need to have some well-managed conflicts in front of our teenagers so they will learn some useful skills, because we realized that quite often as parents, we don't teach our children conflict resolution skills in a really good way, because we may have our arguments behind closed doors and not in front of them or whatever. So we had decided we would have some well-managed discussions at the dinner table in front of our 3 teenage children. Well, neither of us can remember what this argument was about, but Reasonable and Rational did not describe it. And our voices got louder and louder, and we completely forgot there were 3 teenagers at the table, until suddenly Nathan, our middle son, the peacemaker, he bangs on the table really loudly, like this. And he says, "Mom, Dad, stop arguing." And we're like, "Oh, my goodness, what happened there?" He said, "Stop arguing. You're like kids. Can you not behave better? I mean, you're both studying family therapy, for goodness sake. What are you doing?" And Bernie and I just looked at each other really sheepish. And then Nathan turns to Bernie and he goes, "Dad, listen to Mum with your heart. Listen to her feelings and show you understand her." And I'm thinking, I'm so proud of you, son. I really brought you up well. And then he turns to me and he goes, "And Mum, listen to Dad with your brain, because he has some really sensible things to say." And we're both like, right, wow, that was big. And we really learned something that day from our teenager. So clearly we taught him something useful about conflict. That rational brains and emotional hearts speak different languages. And I want you to think back to some of your arguments, because sometimes they've been between the heart and the brain, and it's like speaking, like, I don't know, Chinese and Russian or something. They're just 2 different languages. And actually what you need to do first, and this is the way it needs to go, you need to listen to the emotions, acknowledge them, be empathic, calm the emotions down so that they are not taking over. And then when the emotions are calm, then we can have a more rational discussion. That's really important. And I know that it can take, 40 minutes or more. They used to say 40 minutes, but now I've heard it can take longer, for the emotional part of the brain to calm down well enough for the rational part to work well. So be really aware that if someone is very emotional, just listen to them, calm them. Quite often something that you think, my goodness, where did all that emotion come from? We're just talking about the dishwasher or something like that. It's not about what's happening now. It sometimes connects with pain in the person's past or other pain in the relationship. So it's like a small thing now is just tapped into a huge reservoir of pain. And we need to not tease them or put them down and say, "Whoa, you're overreacting," but just listen and help them to calm and say, "I really care about you and I don't want to hurt you. Let's talk about this and we both feel a bit calmer. And let's think what we can do differently." And that can really help. So that's something that we learned from our teenage son. And it's very important to soothe each other. So once we've had an argument or some distress in the relationship, we need to know, or even in our lives outside the relationship, it's important to know how to calm each other down and not add to each other's stress. Because when we know how to calm each other and soothe each other, and have a sense of humor and laugh about our problems, but not at each other, then we can calm ourselves down together and make sure that we're in a better place for dealing with things we need to talk about, and less likely to argue when we feel soothed, safe, and we're laughing. And also get plenty of sleep, because tiredness can make you more irritable and argumentative. Anything that anyone wants to respond to about what I said so far?
I actually could comment on, being calming.
Mm-hmm.
I have a husband like that. And there's many times when I come home and I just feel down, and like then I get a bit cranky, and he obviously sees it straight away, and then he comes to me and gives me a hug and just says, "I love you," and that little thing, which is just 3 words, and the hug, it actually totally changes, because I start thinking about how much he loves me rather than the things that make me cranky.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
That's really lovely, and the more we can do that for each other, the better relationship we'll have, and the more we'll lower that crankiness. Just spot when each other is in that stress place and say, let me calm you down, let me give you a big hug, let me pour you a bath, let me do something nice for you, or make you a cup of tea. And that is really, really important. So that's really good idea. Because sometimes we actually pile the stress on when someone comes in stressed, and we just throw everything else at them, and they just kind of explode because they can't take any more in. And we need to be really aware of what are we contributing to when we're adding stress to stress. So thank you.
Karen, I was challenged, maybe Kaya, maybe there's some comments online, but I was challenged by the "and" instead of "but" question. Because I realized how many "but" sentences I, well, I guess sub-sentences, I say. So that's very interesting. In different situations, I suppose, but it's really very wide. It's an excellent tip. I was thinking in a funny situation, that I'm a Liverpool supporter, right, and living in Manchester, but so I was thinking of formulating the question like this. So we want to win the league, and Manchester United want to win the league, and Manchester City want to win the league. And I was just trying to think of ways of how to create peace on the Merseyside, in the region. But any tips, I think, are appreciated.
Yeah, some conflicts are way big, so we can't deal with all of them.
We also do have comments from viewers. We talked about what nice things we can do to each other as spouses, and I thought I might just read them because it's really lovely, thinking about all the positives, finishing on the positive note. And Pastor David Foster said, "I gave her my last square of chocolate." And Jenna says, "I have a wonderful husband that knows I hate being cold, and he normally warms my side of the bed before I get in. I really appreciate it." I go on like that too. It's really good.
Nice.
And Ian says, "I make the perfect cuppa. When I boil the kettle, it seems to be hotter for some reason." And Jenna says, Ian says, "Jenna is a fantastic cook, and especially during lockdown, we've had some delicious food. As a foodie, that makes me happy." And I said, my husband, one morning when he was going to work, he cleared this car of snow, and he walked down the road to go to my car, which wasn't on the driveway, and he went and cleared my car as well. I went out with a brush, and it was already clear. I was so happy.
Nice.
And Beatrice also says an interesting comment: "I don't argue at home. I just calmly explain why I am right." And she also says, "It is not us against each other. I just try to convince him we are one team." Just remember that, Julian.
And I would like to think of that as a tip and not a threat, Karen, you know.
That's great.
But Beatrice also says that you know, cold tea makes beautiful. That's what she says to me. So
Jenna also says we all need to feel appreciated. When we don't, that's when I find issues arise.
Yeah.
So appreciation. And Beatrice comments on that. So important. Nowadays, the media plays it as if only women feel unappreciated. But it is so important to express appreciation for each other.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. I'll just.
We got a few more. Beatrice says as well, it helps when you are an old couple and have a large collection of puns and funny sayings. They often come to mind while arguing, and then in the middle of an argument, we have to break out laughing.
That's a really good one too. Laughter is really good, actually. Try and put some laughter in there. See how funny the situation is, really. So I've got a few tips at the end here, then we can have some more thoughts. So you've probably all done this kind of thing where you make a list of solutions and then you rate each idea out of 10. So I will rate it and say Bernie will rate it, and then we'll see which has the highest score and see whether we really want to do that, or maybe we'll go for the next one down. And then we choose a solution and we agree on it together and try it for a week as an experiment. So you're not committing yourself to a different way of doing things forever and ever, because that can feel too big. But if we say, let's try it for a week and see how it goes. And if it's helpful, we can keep doing it. And if we need to tweak it, we can tweak it, or we can try something else. So this is the way we work together to find solutions where we both agree that this is a good thing. This is from The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and he says this comment here. The next time you find yourself seated beside someone from another matrix, he talks about conflicts between people with very different ideologies. Don't just jump right in. Don't bring up morality until you found a few points of commonality, or in some way or other establish some trust. And when you do bring up issues of morality, try to start with some praise or a sincere expression of interest. We're all stuck here for a while, he says, so let's try to work it out. I love that comment at the end. So even though he's talking about strangers with opposite ideologies, he also stresses find some commonality, some trust, some praise, interest, start in a warm place, whatever you're going to do. And it will go better if we start from this warm place and we try to build understanding of the other person rather than just expressing what our beliefs are. We need to listen to the other. So I'm just going to skip this one too. Where's this one? Okay. There are some unresolvable conflicts. So there's some situations where one person is going to have to lose because it's impossible. Like if I wanted to live in Britain and Bernie wanted to live in America, you can't live in both places. One of you has to lose. And whoever gains in those unresolvable conflicts, and their way is what we choose to do together, the person who's the winning one has to show a lot of compassion and understanding to the person who loses. The person who loses needs lots of comfort and support and everything emotionally possible to help them cope with their difficult situation or not being where they want, and bearing one another's burdens. So they need to have lots of extra care and compassion, not be told, oh, just get over it, we're living here now. They need a lot of support while they work through the challenges that they have to face, because there are some conflicts that are unresolvable. But it's like a virtuous circle. So when we have a well-managed conflict and we manage it well, it brings us closer together. We understand what each other needs better. It helps us to develop this unselfish win-win way to solve our problems. And it helps us have practical expressions of love and kindness. So when we have a good conflict that we manage well, we feel better about the relationship and each other. We feel more cared for, and we feel more love in the relationship. And that helps us to have less hurtful conflicts. So it kind of goes in a spiral. But the opposite can also happen. So when you start to fight and you have a conflict that's doesn't go so well and it's very painful and hurtful, then it tends to have a negative effect on the relationship, and the conflicts spiral worse and worse. So we can choose which kind of circle we want to be in with our conflicts, and try and create a circle that ends up us talking about our differences, finding ways to resolve them, finding ways to understand each other better, so I'm less likely to tread on your toes accidentally, and build up understanding and care within the relationship. And that increases our confidence that we can manage our conflicts, and we are a strong couple or family. So love each other. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. And I have told you this about loving each other, so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you, in the amazing way that Jesus loved us. So I wonder at the end of this, what can you do differently? What are you taking away that might change the course of your conflicts in the future? The next time you're hitting that conflict that you go, oh no, here we go again, you will do something different. Because at any point in any argument, either of you can do something different and change the course of that argument. Quite often we just get into the same pattern. But at any point, you can choose to do anything that I've said here this evening and change the course of that conversation. And you can do that. So think about what you might do that might change the course of one of your conflicts. How can you be the peacemaker that God is calling you to be? And what can we do together to create warm and caring churches, organizations, families, communities, where hurtful conflicts are less likely? So there are some things to think about. We can go back to that in a minute, but there are some resources. So on my website, there are some resources for living kindly, and there's hundreds of ideas of kindness on the Trans-European Division website if you Google for Live Kind. I used to do the volunteer work for Scottish conflict resolution, and they had this quiz called Keep the Heat, which means basically stay calm, to find out your conflict style. It's designed for teenagers, and when your conflict style is revealed, it's a circus character. And it's quite fun. Then for couples, there's an app called Two Can Together. It's a free Christian relationship app with modules on conflict communication, love and sex, money. And some of my friends are doing this, and it's an incredible app. It's really good fun. It's very simple, and it teaches you loads of stuff. And there's very real couples talking about their stories there. Then there's Everybody Wins. So some of you might know Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages, and he's written Everybody Wins, the Chapman Guide to Solving Conflicts Without Arguing. So those are some useful resources for you. So maybe you want to reflect at the end of what you might do differently. Maybe you want to put that in the chat, or you can ask some questions, and I'm here for you for a little while longer.
Wow, this is brilliant. Thank you, Karen. So far, I mean, excellent tips. Now, the trouble is that we will have to invite you again. So we will, no, it's not a trouble. It's, I hope, well, we will bother you, but I know that you will make time for us in the future, because I can see this, and I already am getting comments on my phone, feedback, and people find it so useful. So, but it made me, of course, reflect. I know Kaya is working on feedback and comments and questions. She has quite a few, but it helped me a lot. I think going beyond that compromise thing, where you had the square in the middle. There was this middle thing. That's a tricky one,
Mm-hmm.
or you win some, and you might have to lose some, and so on. No, I think that it's perfectly possible, to go for the win-win situation, because in the end, kind of like, you want to remember. I'm talking about the couples, I'm talking about, basically what happened in the beginning when you fell in love with one another,
Mm-hmm.
And what changed since then. And but you were mentioning about the different countries, and the compromise, and it happened like this. I think Beatrice, in the end, she wanted to live in Albania. I wanted to live in Germany, so we chose England, and that has been a win-win situation. And actually, it's been a blessing for us this
That's
past year.
wonderful.
Just wanted to share that,
That's
but
lovely.
yeah, it's true.
We're glad you're happy here.
Thank you. Yes, we are. Go ahead, Kaya.
And we have one comment from Lawrence, which I thought I'll just read as well. And he says, what comes to my mind is a quote from Carl Rogers. It says, young couples die because they forget to communicate with each other. So as you mentioned, empathic, listening, well understanding, accepting each other as they are, and expressing unconditional positive regard to each other are the key factors for having a healthy and long relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's very wise. In some ways, they're very simple. In some ways, they're very difficult at the same time. But I think that we need to do more actually about helping our children and young people to develop conflict resolution skills and understand these basic things in relationship that lower conflict, so that then they go out into their relationships equipped to deal with conflicts well. And I don't think we've really done enough thinking about that and how we do that. So I'm quite interested in helping children and young people to develop those skills.
If we don't have, do we have any questions, Kaya? 'Cause I have one. I always have a.
Always.
But
So what is it?
I want to respect the others. But Karen, basically, it's a quick one on the role of culture, or let's say the background of people, especially in we have cross-cultural marriages. But I think not just between marriage. I'm not talking about couples. Just also in whether in the church community or in the workplace, it doesn't matter. How important? What kind of a role? I mean, is it a very crucial role, or does it not play much of a role? The cultural differences in conflict situations.
I think it can play quite a big role, because I've lived and worked with people from different cultures, and I see that how they talk in an argument, how they express themselves. So some people might express themselves very powerfully and very big with all their arms, and as a British person, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's whoa, I can feel intimidated. But that's their culture, and I can stop and think about that. So it's listening to the other person, seeing how they do things, understanding their culture, asking them more questions. I want to understand more about what this means to you, and being open to learn about the other. I think that's where it happens, and often we don't learn enough about the other person to understand and learn what it means for them when they express things in certain ways. And so it does take a lot more talking and negotiation. But sometimes some research has shown that actually when you're from two different cultures, that's upfront and out there, and you've got to deal with it. But if you're from the same culture, you might not realize how different you are too. So then you don't question it so much, and you can actually get more misunderstanding because it's not overt. But yet every family has its own microculture that shapes, how we had arguments in our family will shape how we argue now, or our fears of arguing. The language our family used will be different. And so it's really important to not take anything for granted. We're all completely different, and to start from there and say, I want to get to know you, who you are, so that I can love you better.
That's perfect. Yeah, no, I appreciate the tip, and I've also noticed that. Of course, I lived also in 3 different countries until now, mainly, and I had to, of course, now I'm in my different churches, even as a pastor, as a minister, and I'm sure with Bernie has a similar experience from his ministerial part of his vocation. Yeah, dealing with different people. What a beautiful thing it is to have so many in an international family and to be able to minister. But you sometimes you understand, and it's been a baptism of fire for me, the past year, especially in the pandemic, the difficulties because we cannot see people eye to eye, but the cultural differences, even those nuances, they in my experience have played quite a role. And but I think after tonight, I think that the question would be, is there any hope? I feel more hopeful. I feel hopeful. I'm became aware. I know that a couple of things I need to improve on. I realize that men, I don't want to generalize, men find it difficult to apologize. I think I need to apologize much more often as a spouse, I think, or as a husband.
That's important. Yes. I have a slide which I didn't put into this one, and it says, apologizing doesn't mean to say I'm right or wrong. It means that this relationship is more important than my ego. So that might be something to think about.
That's it.
And that's what I always say, take care of the relationship. Think about, what effect is this having on the relationship? Am I hurting it, or am I making it stronger? Because absolutely everything we do in a relationship is either making it stronger or pulling it apart. And if we see something's pulling it apart, we should stop doing it. If it's pulling it together, we should do more of it, or ask more. Say, you know what, when I did that, I felt you pull away. Tell me about that, because that wasn't my intention, but I felt you pull away. So I want to know how I hurt you so I don't do it again. We need to have more of those conversations, noticing when someone pulls away or gets sad or gets stressed by what we're saying or gets angry, and say, help me to understand what I just did there.
Thank you so much for the tips. And now I'm already thinking of, basically to book you in the next, the next couple of months. I hope. I know you're very busy. I know you're in high demand. But we here in Greater Manchester, we welcome you, and we would. I think anyway. I think some of your background is at least from Northern England. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, I was born in Yorkshire.
All right. Oh, okay.
Probably even more north than where you are.
But you don't. I'm aware of the Yorkshire dialect, but I don't see that in you. I don't think.
I can occasionally be prevailed upon to speak the language, but
yeah, it's not when people are curious, right? Yes, you see Kaya, she speaks almost the perfect Queen's English by now. It's probably something.
Teach Yorkshire as well, then.
Good. Yeah, well, we want to finish with the word of prayer, and we normally by this time and again, thank you so much, and we look forward to the next time very soon for tonight. And if we have any other comments, of course, sometimes because of the internet they come a little bit later, a couple of minutes with delay, but prayer requests in the end of the program, I'll be very happy, and privileged to, of course, to pray. We normally pray, of course, for the marginalized and frontline and the elderly, but also for the frontline workers, NHS staff, but also services, other services, teachers, educators, well, everyone that is there up, working and risking their lives in service. And but of course, we will also pray tonight for less conflict, for conflict resolution, for conflict reduction, and for God's Spirit to touch every home that has been watching us from Facebook Live tonight. Also, some people watched us from our website. We will very soon be able to broadcast, but we will broadcast this on our YouTube channel. Ringway Church is our YouTube channel. It's a new channel, and but we're getting there. We're getting new subscriptions every week, but we are so thankful. Again, let me thank you for sharing the message on Saturday for us. It was in our live service, and that was broadcast live on Zoom, and we were very thankful. That was Best Family Ever. That was the title, and I recommend to our viewers. Kaya, do you have any? Is there any prayer requests other than the usual ones?
Prayer request for better relationships between peers, parents, brothers and sisters.
All right.
We all need that. If you have any really good tips, I collect good conflict resolution tips and conflict reduction tips, and they end up in my seminars. So if you have anything to share with me, please do share it.
Yes, and they can share them in the comments right there in our chat history, and then we will send them all to you, Karen.
We learn from each other.
All right. Well, once again, I say thank you or Dankeschön, faleminderit. See, in all three languages of my home.
I know them all. Well, I know those words anyway.
I know you do. Yeah. All right, then we're going to have a short word of prayer together. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful, Lord, for tonight's program, and what a blessing it has been to receive so many precious tips and lessons and Lord and advice. We're so thankful for Karen and her very important ministry. Lord, we thank you for Bernie and for her family, a wonderful family that she's been sharing also, Lord, from her own experiences. But we thank you for her ministry all over in many countries across Europe, and helping also, of course, here in the UK as well, couples therapy. And we pray for your blessing, Lord, for as you continue to use her, Lord, in your service and to be a blessing to others, to many. Thank you for Kaya, and bless her as well, and her marriage. Lord, we are thankful for everyone that was able to be there with us online. Bless them and bless their marriages. Bless the relationships, Lord, between parents and teens and children and siblings and parents and so on, and relatives. Lord, help us to have better communication with one another, even in the church family, Lord. But in a special way, Lord, we want to bring in front of your presence, Lord, the elderly and the marginalized, who at this very difficult time of lockdown and during the pandemic, Lord, have been suffering quite a bit, Lord, as they have been isolated in many situations. They feel alone, and there is no much contact with the outside world, with their loved ones. Please give them from your love, Lord, an extra portion tonight. Embrace them with your loving embrace. Assure them that you are there and you will look after them. And we are thankful, Lord, for at the same time for our frontline workers. Bless them, Lord, keep them safe. We are so thankful for their courage, Lord, as they serve in hospitals, in schools, in supermarkets, in buses, transport, everywhere in churches, everywhere they go, Lord, community services. Bless them. They are very precious to you, Lord, and to those that they serve. Thank you again for tonight, and we ask for your blessing in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Thank you. All right, then take care. Kaya, thank you. I don't know, I forgot how you say thank you in Estonian. Okay, tell us.
Aitäh.
Come again.
Aitäh.
Aitäh.
Aita. Aita. Why is every word in Estonian so short? It's all right.
I'd like to make it short.
All right. Okay, then. All right, then. Good night. Take it.